Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Cool Careers and How You Got Them. It's been a while since we've had an episode. I've been wrapped up in the world of college applications and decisions, but I'm happy to be back. I'm your host, Zain Raza. I'm sure lots of adults ask you what you want to be when you grow up, and if you're anything like me, you don't really have an answer for them. Hopefully, my podcast can give you some inspiration. I'm very excited and lucky to be joined today by Mrs. Maysa Dahdouli, who has a very cool and interesting career. She's dedicated to becoming the CEO of Bertelsmann US with a background in corporate tax. And without further delay, let's get into it. Mrs. Dahdouli, how are you? Of
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Zane.
course, thank you so much for coming on. We're really excited to learn from you. Why don't you start us off how we always do? What is your official title?
Okay. So my official title is actually CEO of Bertelsmann Inc. And so maybe I can give you a little bit of background on what that is, um,
Hmm.
as well as I head up so I joined Bertelsmann Inc. I should say where I joined. I joined Bertelsmann Inc. in December of 2018. And to lead the US corporate tax group. So, really, the whole corporate function was led by me, overseeing anything to do with corporate tax, such as M&A, mergers and acquisition, tax planning, compliance, you name it. My team and I did it all. 3 years ago. But I should say is the corporate tax role was really what led me into this current role as well. So I have a dual function. Is in the corporate tax world, we touch so many aspects of the business that most people probably don't realize, right?
Hmm.
So supply chain planning, like I said, M&A and so on. And so, I was then moved into the CEO role of Bertelsmann Inc., which is the U.S. corporate center for Bertelsmann. And so now I lead up all the corporate functions for Bertelsmann on the US side, supporting all of our US subsidiaries. Now, you'll probably wonder what is Bertelsmann? Because when I was approached about this role, I didn't know much about the name Bertelsmann. And when I really started to read about the company Bertelsmann, I realized how much we interact with Bertelsmann on a daily basis and probably don't know it under the umbrella, the overarching umbrella name.
Hmm.
So Bertelsmann is actually a German headquartered mega company, and we're in many different businesses. So in the publishing space, our largest subsidiary is Penguin Random House. Book publishing. So sure, see, you're smiling, so you
Yep.
know exactly who that is. In the music world, we own BMG Music. So artists such as John Legend and so on. So again, names that probably in the US were more inclined to know under the brand names, not so much umbrella, but Bertelsmann owns all of these brands. And
Hmm.
so we also have businesses in the education space. We also have business in the TV production, as well as logistics and supply chain management.
So what's it like when you're working for a company that wears so many different hats and you've got your hand in all these different bags completely seemingly to us outsiders unrelated things. How does that come into play? Does it make it more difficult? Does it make it more interesting?
That's a great question. So I spent my 11 years prior to Bertelsmann in the medical space, so in medical device. And that was actually a question for myself as how do I pivot from medical device manufacturing to media? And I would say, I think that it provides a very unique world, right,
Hmm.
in the space of Bertelsmann, because you're right, you are jumping from different businesses, different um, you know, um, uh, plans, and as well as how they meet the market, right? But I would say is at the core, it's some of the same principles would apply. And so, really is understanding from each management team is when we're working on a project, what are we trying to achieve here? And working together as a team to find that common ground. So I would say, yes, sometimes there are some things industry specific, but I would say, there are also principles that apply across the board.
Hmm. Okay, great. Now let's do a little blast from the past. When you were a teenager, because our audience is targeted for teenagers. What were you like?
You want the answer I would give you or my parents would give you?
Let's hear them both.
So it's funny because I actually was a teenager who wondered this very exact question, which is the premise of your podcast, which why I love it so much. Is cool careers and how do you get there? I try to connect the dots. But I would say is I was very curious teenager and
Hmm.
probably not to the benefit of my parents, meaning I was not one to just take the answer no very lightly. I wanted to challenge and understand why and explore and but also really test my boundaries. And I would say is in hindsight, while it really upset my parents at times back then, is really being true to who you are. And when you have conviction, for the better things, right? So careers, career choice, school choices, and so on. I feel that it always panned out to my benefit, and then my family came along.
Hmm. Great. And did you have any idea of like what kind of field you wanted to work in or like a specific job?
No, actually. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So the corporate world was actually something very unique and almost non-existent in my family. I would say I was the first one to enter the corporate world from my
Hmm.
family. Again, everyone just kind of the family owned their own businesses. So no, I didn't have that insight, right? And so I chose an undergraduate degree in marketing, thinking that it was some sort of pathway to something that I've known, which was business from my family, right? But then I have to tell you, I graduated and I thought this is probably not for me. Meaning, I wasn't a very creative person. Yes, I understood business and I appreciated business and I thought it would be cool to make the marketing connection. But then I realized this isn't for me. And a little later than in life than I would have preferred. But I did graduate with my undergrad in marketing. And then I asked myself, what is it that you really enjoy? And the answer was always math. For some odd reason,
Wow.
it was always math. And so I wanted a career in math, but I had to be honest with myself. And I naturally have always loved, the world of teaching. And so I explored a career in becoming a math teacher. And being honest with myself, I first knew that my personality, I like to continued growth. I would
Hmm.
be bored in the classroom for a very long time. And so I then decided, okay, it's not career in teaching math, maybe a career in accounting, which kind of blends both the world of math as well as business environment. So I set out to go back and get my master's degree in accounting. It was there while I was getting my master's degree that I experienced a fantastic professor, Professor Roth, um, who really opened my eyes to the world of corporate tax, which again,
Hmm.
was never on my horizon before, never knew a thing about it. And I really liked it because it kind of blended the world of law as well as math in an environment, in a business environment. So it really met all the elements that I was looking for and things that I knew that I would enjoy, and hence started my career in tax.
And can you talk a little bit about the journey from tax to your current position now?
Sure. I would say they're intertwined and they're really, I would say my career in tax is what led to where I am today. And I would say it's still, a very big role in what I do today. And so, I would say it taught me a lot about, most times people think corporate tax or tax is just simply, April 15th comes along and you file what you owe the government. No, and that's what I really enjoy about tax is that you're really working with the corporate teams, whether it's on buying new targets or supply chain management. There, all of those really have an element of tax, and you really learn a lot about the business in the
Mhm.
corporate tax world. So I would say it's really been a huge part of where I am today.
Okay, so a pretty common theme that I see pop up a lot is growth. A lot of the guests that I have will talk about, their current career, but then they'll also reflect back on the things that they were doing before they got to wherever they are now. So you had to outline some certain skills or even things you picked up doing. It could be I worked at Starbucks when I was in high school and I learned this from there and I still use it today. If you had to pick something like that, what would it be?
So I'm going to answer that in a twofold,
Okay, great.
and in two ways. First, I would say the skill that I, really impress upon my kids, and also my teens is the hunger for learning, meaning
Mm,
is always staying curious, right? Even if it's something you know nothing about. If you're in a meeting and you hear a topic or you hear a phrase or a conversation and you know nothing about, go back to your desk and research it, just out of curiosity, because the next time around you'll start to connect more dots, right? The next conversation, you'll those dots start to connect. So staying really curious and hungry for learning more, that was always my thing, right? I constantly wanted to be in a learning environment. The second part of how I would answer your question is you'd be surprised on what jobs that you can start when you're young at your age, that could really be very, very impactful in your future growth. Meaning, so I'll give you my experience. My When I was approaching graduation, high school graduation, I wanted a job, and my father at the time was really more impressing on me just to stay focused on school, that
hmm
it's going to be a distraction, and so on and so forth. And this is what I mean by being a little bit more stubborn. And
That's a familiar conversation in my house too.
yeah. And by the way, I'm not encouraging anyone to go against their parents, but I'm just saying that was my experience. um, but I wanted to go out and I wanted to prove that I can do it, that I can do
hmm
school and I can have a job and so on. And so I got a job at the local Gap store, against my parents' wishes, and told them after the fact. And I have to tell you, back then, I just took it as a job that, oh, just a retail job and so on. But I ended up accidentally growing in that job while I studied, right? And so by the time I graduated college, I actually held, management position and so on. And in hindsight, a lot of what I do today is people management, people
hmm
development, and navigating scenarios, right? And that is where I would say a lot of that training actually came from my retail world, because there was a huge emphasis on the soft skills, on coaching, on training, on development, that
Absolutely.
that those things are not so. We enter our careers and we're so hyper focused on our hard skills, right, on the technical stuff, that those soft skills really become more important than anything, because you enter a room and you are tasked with solving a dilemma, a business dilemma, right? And you have all these criteria. And it is those soft skills that is understanding people, understanding the strength of your teams, understanding how do you bring everyone together, I would say become paramount.
hmm That's actually exactly the reason that I wanted to get. I still do want to get a job, and I use the same exact terminology to my mom. I was like, "Mom, the soft skills, like they're so important." So I'm trying to work at a pizza shop over the summer, and for this exact same reason. And the curiosity thing also. I'm sure that comes into play all the time, right? When we were talking about having your hand in seven different hats and with the divisions of Bertelsmann. But also, I find that a lot of the guests that I have also say curiosity, and that comes into play with the pivoting in different career choices and moving around. So completely, I get what you're saying. So obviously, I think you have a very cool career because you're on the show. But if you had to outline a couple things, what would you say makes your career cool or unique?
Well, I would say the fact that every day is a new day. There is no 2 days the same in my world. So, today, one day I could be working on a potential opportunity in the publishing space, and here are the criteria. We're trying to get some benefits out of the way that we structure this deal, and so on. And so that to me is exciting.
Hmm.
The next day it could be um, you know, actually, in today's world, I mean, I'll give you a very real example, right? We're in an environment right now where we have executive orders every day, right?
Hmm.
And so in today's world is, interpreting those executive orders and what does it mean for our company, right? Because we are impacted by everything that happens at the federal and state level. And so, really, then pivoting immediately to address what those new changes can be. So, I would say the fact that there's always uniqueness in managing, the different environments that we have to navigate through, but also is working with our teams in the U.S. I very much enjoy that, and that I always learn from those teams.
Hmm. If you had to outline a couple traits, character traits that it would take to be successful in this field, what would they be?
People skills.
Hmm.
Always maintaining a smile, even in when there is an issue or a challenge. I find that people respond or they feed off of your energy as a leader, right? And so if you are, chaotic or respond in anger or respond
Hmm.
when something goes wrong, then the whole team becomes in a fury, right? Is always maintaining that calm, the smile, and also, is there's nothing that you can't figure out as a team as long as you pull the right people to the table and you strategize and get to a resolution. So I would just say maintaining calm, but also really focusing on the people and maintaining a smile.
Hmm. What's it like having the responsibility of working and I'm sorry, managing people under you? Because I have a very seemingly silly example. But I am a student ambassador at my school.
Mhm.
So like I take families on tours. We represent the school at different events and stuff. And then me and a couple other kids got promoted to be coordinators. So now we oversee the student ambassador program. And even just that, like the five of us managing 60 or so kids, I'm not gonna say I don't love it, but at times it can get really, frustrating and annoying and you know, it it's a point of what's the word? It stresses me out sometimes because, and especially because I'm managing people, but there's still somebody above me, right? The dean of admissions is who I'm reporting to. So the actions of all the people under me are reflected on me.
Mhm.
So on a much bigger scale than what I'm dealing with, how do you deal with something like that?
And that's a big responsibility, Zane. And I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job. I would say is, it's very important that it's always a we, right?
Hmm.
Because people, tend to, when something goes wrong, is immediately go into defense mode and, trying to, explain what happened, right? And I would say that anytime something has gone wrong, right, is, obviously maintaining composure, like I said, working through what happened, how did it go wrong? How do we correct it? But most importantly for me, most importantly is what did we learn from it? right?
Mm,
And how do we correct it prospectively? So that to me is more crisis or issue management, right? But in terms of people management, I've always really focused on what everyone individually are really good at, right? And that is really important because that's where people shine. Sure, there are some jobs that you kind of have to do the things that you don't enjoy or not so good at, but if you really try to match the person to their passion, you will get incredible results. And I've, recently done that a few times where I've had teams on the people on the team who were in the wrong roles and created a brand new role that really fit not only the needs of the business, but really fit their personality. An incredible, incredible performance there and value brought to the company. So I would
mhm,
really, say is my job as a leader is not only managing the work, it's also finding where are people's strengths and matching them to those strengths.
mhm. Making notes for myself so I can bring this back to the student ambassador program.
Sure.
Um, I learn as much as all the audience does. This is all new for me, so it's also very helpful. Thank you. Why is what you do important?
Why is what we do important? I'm going to take that on a personal level. And I would say on a business level, obviously, what we do is important. I mean, for some of our businesses, it's, for example, in the public space, um, having different voices is very important. But in
Hmm.
the healthcare space, one of our businesses has an online education program. Again, all important stuff. But I would say for me, why it's important is I am not only setting the tone for my own team at work, but I'm also setting the tone for my children at home. And
Mm,
that was always very important for me growing up. My father, like I said, he was an entrepreneur, but he unintentionally, not by words, but by action, taught me the value of work ethic and honesty and
mm,
people. And so that is important to me because the way I operate, the way I hold myself accountable, the way I function, and even if they hear work conversations, when I take them, is it's you're indirectly sending a message to your children and
right.
setting the standard for your children. So that's really becomes an important thing for me that I relay onto them what I obtain from my own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know when we were talking earlier and I asked you what makes your career cool or unique, you said every day is different. So there might not be a regular day at work, but for example, like what's the most normal it could get? What would a regular day at work look like?
Okay, so my most normal day would be waking up. So, since we are German headquartered, there's
Hmm.
always the Europe email time zone emails in the inbox when I wake up. So going through those emails, just reacting or making sure that there's nothing new or significant on the horizon. Then I would say the next course of the day would be, taking my typical calls, whether it's weekly updates with the team, checking in on open M&A projects that we have. So we're highly acquisitive in the U.S., and so we work on many projects at once, and then closing the day with what needs to get done, whether it's this week or the following week, so that way we're not in pure um, uh, procrastination mode that we have plans for weeks out in terms of what needs to happen, and for me to align with those team members in advance of anticipated stuff on the horizon.
Hmm. Yeah, so when you say the team, how does this work? Is it like there's one person that's kind of managing or representing each subdivision and they're reporting to you?
No. So I say the team, meaning, so on my team, I have head of HR, CHRO, which is Chief Human Resource Officer,
Hmm.
head of legal affairs, head of finance and treasury, and then and then my tax team. And so when I say checking in with the team, are the team leads on in that aspect. And so from those team leads, then they manage respectively with the underlying businesses in the US.
Okay, got it. And you brought up another interesting thing, Bertelsmann being a German company. Obviously, the funky email timing with the time difference. But are there any other kind of things that were new to you, maybe like a cultural thing or the way the company is run, anything you had to deal with?
I wouldn't say new. So my former company that I mentioned, the medical device, we were
Hmm.
global, and I oversaw corporate tax for global as well. So had the experience in much in many parts of the world in terms of working with local teams there. So nothing new in terms of working with German colleagues, and has been fantastic to be at Bertelsmann and also work with our corporate center
Hmm.
colleagues. Um, I lost my train of thought there. So no, I wouldn't say anything new there. Um, no, I would say
No? Okay. Um,
I completely lost my train of thought. I had a thought there.
if it comes back to you,
I,
we'll revisit it. So a lot of my guests also don't have an exact like a 9 to 5 set schedule, but you had to estimate how many hours would you say you work a week?
Ooh, that's a good question.
The work never stops, does it?
No. So I would say that's a very good question. I can't gauge in our count, but
Hmm.
there are seasons for us, or I should say times of year. So, your typical work week, right, is what, 40 hours in the US. Actually, at Bertelsmann, it's 35 in the US, but we don't really go by the hour count, right? Because it's really dependent on the needs of the business. So, for example, if we're closing on a deal, and one recently closed on a Saturday, which is very unusual for us, it's working the weekend, right?
Hmm.
It's not that often that we do a weekend closing, but again, it's really being in tune with what is critical and
Hmm.
what can wait till the next day, right? So if we are obviously really eager to close on a deal, that's going to require more hours than a typical work week, and to get the deal done. In a typical work week, I would say, it's probably 40 plus hours. Um, but there is no typical week, I would say.
Okay, got it. Now, another thing that's really important for people I see a lot is flexibility in the work schedule. Like my son gets sick, I want to be able to pick him up from school and go home, make him soup, take care of him, or I have this unique opportunity come up. I want to be able to take a couple days and, experience it. I'm sure someone at your status, it's not an easy substitution where you have a replacement ready to go on standby, but what kind of flexibility do you have?
So I would say a lot of flexibility, and
Hmm.
that's not only important for me, but it's also important for my teams, because I do have a lot of moms and dads, and or people who simply have other obligations, right? Family obligations and so on. So a lot of flexibility, whether it's working from home or going into the office. And sometimes I do need to step out and pick up the kids, right, from school.
Hmm.
But when you're at actually a former CFO of mine, who I had a lot of great respect for, used to say to us, and this is when in my junior years, is you're all professionals. You manage your own, right?
Mm.
And I love that because it's true. It puts the responsibility on each individual member to bring, their best to the workplace. And so I've never been a micromanager in that respect. And, so I appreciate the flexibility, right? And I've always respected it and expect the same from my team. So I would
Mhm.
say a lot of flexibility, not only for myself, but for my team, but knowing that they're going to bring their best every day.
Okay, got it. We talked a lot about work, but how do you use your free time?
Whew. My free time, I would say, is heavily consumed with my children, my teen and my tween, but also, like to stay active, do have a lot of fun going out with friends and, trying new things.
Hmm.
I would say travel is a very big part of our lives. So really, as much as possible, try to break away from the computer and go out and see this beautiful world.
What's the next travel destination?
Okay, that one is not with the children or the husband. Um, um, a girlfriend and I are actually going out to Utah to a wellness resort right in the middle of the rocks and
Nice.
visiting Sedona. And yeah, an adult experience, not with the kids.
There you go. Little extra free time. We talked about, your training in a retail world, giving you skills in people management, and you're working with people under you, but is your work like how much of it is actually with other people? Is it all with other people?
With other
All
people.
of it. Okay.
You're only as good as your team and how you work with your team. Absolutely. So everything is working with somebody on the team.
Okay. Got it. And is that generally how it works for everybody at your level?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question, because that has been a point of, I would say, growth throughout
Hmm.
career, but also in helping develop team members. Is most people at certain parts of their career believe I can just do this much faster myself, right? The time it's going to take me to bring someone else to support on this, I can just get this done myself.
Hmm.
You'll find is yes, you could probably get it done faster yourself, if you have the know-how, but you're really not then growing your team, are you? Right? You're not sharing experience. You're not sharing that growth opportunity, that learning experience. And
Hmm.
so, early on, I really forced myself, even when there were times where it was easier to do it myself, is to bring somebody else in because that was always a good opportunity to train, to learn, and also hear different perspectives because, my perspective isn't necessarily the right perspective all the time, right? And someone else might have something to offer. So always working with someone, even if it's something that I can do on my own, it's a learning opportunity for somebody else.
Absolutely. Um, as you've gone on this career journey, come a long way. What's the next step in this field for you?
The next step. That's a great question. I would say, I mean, the US, so like I said, Bertelsmann is a German headquartered company, and Germany has always been the number one market, but the US has grown exponentially in the last years, and actually, for the first time in its history, has now become the number one territory globally. So the US continues to become a very important market for Bertelsmann. And in my job, in terms of supporting on the corporate end of those initiatives, is my job naturally grows because the complexities grow, the
Hmm.
needs grow, the needs of the US businesses grow. And so my job will naturally grow alongside that. And really thinking about how we now leverage and support the volume growth in the US. So, that's a constant conversation for my team and I, as the US exponentially grows, is looking into automation projects, looking into AI. How do we supplement what we do today a little faster, a little bit, more accurate with the tools that we have available? So I would say is the job will continue to grow with the U.S. growth.
How do you see AI coming into play now for Bertelsmann?
Oh, that's a great question. So we have a whole AI team, and I mean, what I've learned from them is incredible in
Hmm.
terms of where AI is being used throughout the organization. It's really fascinating. But I would say from my experience and my group is I don't think AI is going to replace any of the functions on the corporate side in terms of what we do, but it certainly enhances what we do. And it certainly can be a very powerful tool in terms of how do we, again, support this growth, but faster and better, right? And
Hmm.
so I feel like somebody, I forget who said this, but it's if you're not using AI, you're almost going to be, outmarketed from the rest who are using AI.
Yeah, this is actually a good time to do the mailbag. I had a couple more questions I wanted to ask, but we'll get to those later because it's relevant right now. If you would like to submit for the mailbag, you can email Zane at Cool Careers and How You Got Them. You could fill out our Get in Touch form on our website, coolcareersandhowyougothem.com, or you can DM us on Instagram at Cool Careers and How You Got Them. And today's question comes from Katie, who's a junior in Oregon, and she wants to know if she's interested in working in the corporate world, but she's scared about how AI could either dominate that area or, you know, put her at risk of losing her job. Are there any ways she can ensure job security?
Absolutely is, I would say, um, I wouldn't be so concerned that it's going to replace the job as much as how can it enhance the job. So really understanding is in whatever field that you're in or that you're looking to come into, right? Is
Hmm.
how is AI being leveraged in those roles? So you can almost get ahead of that, but also really think about how do you integrate that with what you would have to offer in that role. So if you see it as a barrier, I think that's going to be only to your downside. But if you see it as a benefit and enhance it and embrace it, then I would say is you have nothing to fear of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a favorite division of Bertelsmann to work with? Like, are you like, oh, yay, I get to work with the publishing group today. Like, I'm so excited. And then other days you're like, oh, I don't want to work with marketing. Not that, no diss to marketing, but
Th- That's a very dangerous question to ask, Dane. I mean, I would not pick one subsidiary or one group over the other. I mean, obviously, our job is to support them, make sure that we're great partners to them. But I would say is I do enjoy the publishing space. I think it's
mhm,
very interesting. Also is when we're looking and when we're working at some of these projects, what you learn about how certain companies came about and the history and it really shapes the voices right in the market today, right? So whether it's a publishing group that's focused on children's books, for example, or publishing group focused on wellness or anything like that, is learning the background. I find is always fascinating and how they came
mhm.
to be, and really enjoy when it's a company that was built from the ground up, not so much, the mega companies, but really seeing that fruition and learning about the company. So I would say that space. But
Publishing?
this is not picking a favorite. This is just in terms of
No, of course not. Of course not. When I was looking at all the divisions, I was really interested by the record label BMG. Could you talk a little bit about that?
so yeah, sure. So BMG, like I said, is our music group, and I would say that's always fascinating because when there is an investment proposal on some artist that I either listen to or my kids listen to, that's always a very I would say cool aspect of the job, right?
Hmm.
Um, in terms of, I just think that the music space, though, in terms of what we do on the corporate side, or at least in my role, is very unique to the others, right? Because in terms of the rights world is very different than the tangible world, like the publishing space, right? So
Hmm.
in the world of publishing, yes, there are um, the intangible aspect of it or the digital aspect of it. But primarily, it's a very tangible business, meaning the hardcore, the paper books, and so on. And so it's a very different world when it's in the digital space, and understanding all the implications of that, because you as a consumer, you
Hmm.
simply go on and you click on a song to listen to, and that's it, right? But in the background, there are so many complications to that one click that you would not even imagine, right? In terms of the royalties, the administration of that, and all that goes behind the scenes. So I would say it's a very fascinating, unique world.
How does that work? Do you approach an artist or does an artist approach you guys?
Yeah, so that is actually done primarily at the BMG level, so
Okay.
that's at the operating unit level. And where we get involved is in terms of if there is an investment proposal, right? Is at the corporate level, is reading through that, making sure that there's no items that we would flag in
Hmm.
terms of executing the investment proposal and providing that feedback.
What would be an example of a flagged item?
That's a very good question. So, for example, I'll give you an example in terms of we look at a target, right? And there are risks in terms of an HR risk, for
Okay.
example, or for we would structure the deal if there's a more beneficial tax structuring opportunity. That would be a flagged item, right? So, it could be from different work streams in terms of how we think about the project, but also what it could do for us. So we could have made an offer that wasn't the most beneficial offer in terms of how we can actually, obtain certain benefits in the way that we structure it. So that would be a flagged item. We would provide that, and so that's really, I would say, where I would probably say I enjoy spending most of my time is on structuring deals from a corporate tax perspective, because
Hmm.
it really it's a very great place to find some nice values of a value for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever get to meet the artists?
No, we're just on the corporate side, so we don't.
Oh, okay. If people want to learn more about you or what you do, where can they go?
So my LinkedIn would probably be the best place. Try to stay active on there, but if you have if someone wants to bounce me an email, happy to answer emails as well.
Yeah, I saw Bertelsmann got ranked as one of the best places to work. That's pretty good. I'm sure that's has something to do with you and your management style.
So that's all the credit goes to our HR team who facilitated that. But yes, we got 2 years in a row. We just started applying 2 years ago for the Great Place to Work, which is a
Hmm.
not only nationally but globally recognized rank. But it's a really neat program where they survey the staff, and it's so we maintain our own internal surveys at Bertelsmann, and fortunately we rank really high. Um,
Hmm.
but this is completely third party. And since, I would say for me personally, when I joined Bertelsmann, the name Bertelsmann was not really, I would say, it didn't resonate until I understood the underlying brands. I thought it was important that, when we go out to market here in the US, that we maintain that recognition. So yeah, 2 years in a row, super happy about that. And respect remains to be one of our top categories that we rank really high, and I value that.
What's the secret? But what makes it so great?
Really, again, respecting people at all levels, respecting different opinions, there's, perspectives. And like I said, is if you stay people focused and, true to who you are, people will bring their best. Everyone comes to
Absolutely,
work wanting to do a great job. It's a matter of you figuring out how do you get them to do a great job.
absolutely. So as we wrap up, you've got the ear of many highly ambitious students. Do you have any final advice for them or an ask for them?
So actually, I thought about this before we started our interview. Thinking about my conversations with my son and my daughter. So our time in the car is always career time, right?
Mm,
Or chats about everything going on in life. And my 14-year-old son, anytime he's talked about careers, it's I want to make a lot of money. And so my angle, or I would say my tip for your listening audience, and also the same tip I would give for my son, is don't follow the money. Follow what you will enjoy. The money is temporary. Yes, it'll give you joy upfront, but that's only short-lived. Follow something you truly enjoy, that, yes, can give you a comfortable life and so on, but that will last you a lifetime.
mhm. Where do you think the disconnect comes from where people try and follow the cash instead of following what they are really interested or what they're passionate about?
I think it comes with wisdom, right?
Hmm.
When you're young, you see success equates a dollar sign, right? I think, when you get older in life, you start to appreciate that, that's not the case. Happiness comes from, um, being happy, but also being comfortable, right? And that you can be in a job making a lot of money, but not working with the right people, not working in the right field that you want. And
Hmm.
that's only going to bring you down, right, in terms of your overall feeling, right? So I would say is, if you find the right career that suits you and suits your passions, but then also marrying that with the right environment, right? Is again, don't go after the job that's going to pay you the double in the salary versus the team that were really respectful and treated you well in the interview cycle and so on. That'll pay you in dividends in the long run.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Dahdouli. This is really, really insightful and informational for all of us, informative for all of us. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was great. Thank you so much, Zane.